Welcome to Adrian's Corner. I am Adrian.
And I'm Mr. K.
And on today's episode, we'll be talking about Hades, an action dungeon crawler which won Game of the Year from the Game Developers' Choice Awards. Now, this game, originally released back on September 17th of 2020 for PC and Nintendo Switch, was finally ported over to the PlayStation and Xbox One. The game, developed by Supergiant's Pyre, features a hack-and-slash combat system and focuses on exploring the Underworld. It follows the exploits of Prince Zagreus, the son of Hades, and his determination to escape to the surface, all the while knowing that only death awaits. So grab your gear and take the fight to the Guardians of the Underworld as we deep dive into this game. It's everything Hades, starting now. So Hades, a chance to escape from hell and make it to Olympus, where all your fancy, dysfunctional, and sometimes downright petty and violent relatives are waiting to see you. So how did the game do? Well, let's take a look at what this game gets right first. Let's talk about the aesthetics of the game. The decor absolutely fits with the style of gameplay, from its whimsical if not dark hellscape artwork to the more lush, cool feel of later zones. Each stage of the game, including the home base, has a unique feel that instantly tells you where you are and what to expect through each stage of the game. Though this helps the game build momentum and even tension as you get closer and closer to the exit, hoping you don't make a mistake and get cast back down to the bottom depths of hell. Then another brilliant move by the devs here is the return by death mechanic. This opens up so many amusing twists and turns of storytelling, and makes dying feel less like a punishment and more like a way to advance the story. An interesting and fun way to use failure as a way to continue unfolding the story.
It would have been fun, if it wasn't so monotonous and tedious to play due to this mechanic.
What about it wasn't fun to you?
So you know how you love FPS shooters, which are really repetitive to the max, but you can never really tell? This game doesn't do that. In fact, it gets repetitive so quickly, so fast, that I realized that I wanted to quit the game and honestly never go back to it.
Now the only real complaint from me early on, in regards to dying and repetition, was the storytelling did take a bit to get going, making for a bit of a confusing initiation to the game, which took me out of the experience. In other words, you jump right in, there's no real story, so at first that threw me off a bit, but again, we will talk about more of that later. Now, sticking with what the game got right, let's talk about the fighting mechanics and upgrades. Its hack and slash style is done in a clean and neat fashion. There's nothing too complicated here, making it easy to get the hang of each weapon thrown your way without too great of a learning curve. Each weapon you find has power-ups to unlock, which in turn can drastically change the way each weapon is used, allowing the player to better fine-tune a preferred play style. You've got the Blade, Eternal Spear, Shield of Chaos, Heart-Seeking Bow, Twin Fists of Malphon, and by far the best and most overpowered weapon in the game, the Adamant Rail. This, then coupled with the personal upgrades like those you get from the Mirror Glass, help make your character ever more powerful and strong as you continue each attempt to make it to the surface. Then there's the storytelling. Now this was great, and it's a two-parter for me here. First, you have the way the story is revealed each time you die. Each piece of the story was rife with comedy that kept me engaged, which was especially important for me as initially it seemed quite daunting a task to make it through all the stages to the surface without dying. This provided lots of motivation to keep trying, knowing that failure would bring me more answers. And of course, more comedy.
Oh, ow, so you got burned down to a crisp out there, standing in magma, right? I know you've got your burning feet and all, but standing in magma? Why, I'm not so sure that's a good idea.
But aside from that, the second part to the storytelling and why it was so important in the delivery and why it was so good for me is the comedy. This was huge for me. The humor is brilliantly done. Wisely self-deprecating at times and never too over the top. My personal favorite was the Dusa character, who carries an obvious crush for the main protagonist and whose nerves make for quite a few hilarious moments for me in my many runs to the surface.
I just wanted to say, don't bother picking up my room today. I'm headed out for a while.
I have to clean the rafters.
Now, what you see here is classic Hades, and something I'd highly recommend you don't miss out on.
Nice to meet you. Look, I've done some things that maybe aren't great, but I am very, very sure I haven't murdered anyone.
Now that we've covered what the game gets right here, let's slide on over to where it misses the mark. First, and probably the biggest negative to the experience for me, was the way the game initially opened up. You have no introduction, no story to get into, just nothing. Nope. Instead, you get dropped into combat and are forced to figure everything out as you go. For me, this was very off-putting, and my initial reaction to the game was to compare it to a cheap mobile one, where quick play and no story-driven experiences are the norm. Now this of course would change as the game unfolded, but the lack of story direction for the first hour or two of my experience had me feeling like the pace of the game was dragging, and I caught myself fighting the urge to stop playing altogether.
So, on top of that, going back to what I said earlier, and spoiler alert here, the game loop is tedious due to the fact that once you actually beat the final boss, you die no matter what you do. Which means all your work is deleted and reset when you get back to the main base. And honestly, it was a drag when I realized I had to play with none of the boons or upgrades that I had to start from the beginning, no matter what I did. I didn't feel like I improved greatly. I felt like the game stagnated. It wasn't fun to me. It was straight up tedious.
Now to be fair, while you did lose the upgrades you found in the mission itself, the personal upgrades do stack, including weapon upgrades that you could create before you go into each run.
But in your runs, it's deleted, and that's what I didn't like. I felt like the game could have been made harder if you kept beating it and then maybe more enemies, or have enemies with new abilities. That way, when you beat the game, you know have all your upgrades still in your character, but the difficulty level gets much more difficult each time you try and escape again.
And this then brings me to the second biggest problem with the game. No tutorials and no direction, again at first. This made for quite a few frustrating trial and error scenarios that once again took me out of the game and had me focusing on all the wrong things from this otherwise entertaining and amusing title. For example, it took me an embarrassingly long time to figure out how to change weapons. I wanted my sword back after unlocking the spear, but I wasn't sure where to go or what to do to change it. My expectation was that I could change weapons during each run, and that was not to be the case, which made me feel really stupid when I finally figured out how to change it later.
And mind you, the weapons were unique and well designed for the game, outside the railgun. The railgun is what actually ruined the game for me 100%. Because once you get it, the game becomes incredibly simple. And that's not fun. It took away my desire to keep playing.
Now speaking of the boons, and another example of why this was a misstep, each time you die all the upgrades or boons you find throughout each run is stripped off of your character when you die. Now because of the lack of in-game instruction, I found myself at a loss of any way to get lasting upgrades for my character to make Zagreus more powerful with each run. Now this of course wouldn't last, as I eventually discovered the Mirror of Night, which finally gave me a window into the upgrade process for this game, and gave me something to build towards, a sense of progress if you will, which as Mr. K pointed out was one of his biggest gripes, as he felt like each time you died, you had to start over almost completely from scratch. And of course, there are the personal upgrades and the weapon upgrades, which do give you something to work towards. Now, all in all though, despite these few complaints, my experience was enjoyable, and after seeing the game through to the very end, felt quite satisfied with the journey and the story. I can safely say that if you enjoy action dungeon crawlers with a hack and slash at its core, then this game is definitely worth the time and money.
And mind you, as much as the story was getting better as the game went on, when you went to the quote-unquote official ending, by the time I got there, on the 16th run, it just wasn't fun for me. It was boring work, and I realized I didn't give 2 cans of tuna about what I was doing anymore. And when I finally closed the game, I realized, no, I will never come back to this game. I won't ever play it again. I won't have anything to do with it. It's not a bad game, it just didn't scratch my itch, and it didn't catch my attention. I wish they could have done more with it. But anyway, next time, don't call it Hades if you're playing as somebody else. It really bothered me. Just saying.
Now that is a strange gripe, and I can't agree with you on that because again, you're trying to escape from Hades. That seems pretty obvious.
No, you're trying to escape from hell, not from Hades. You're in hell, not Hades. Hades is your dad.
Right, but Hades controls the underworld.
Well, we'll have to agree to disagree.
Well, all of that being said, let us know what you think in the comments. Is Mr. K right here, or am I that Hades is the best name for this game possible? Now from Adrian's Corner, I'm Adrian.
And I'm Mr. K.
And we'll see you all next time.